Welcome to the Scott My Show, a podcast where we talk about bodybuilding, health improvement, and physique enhancement. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to let you know that I do offer one-on-one coaching. If you're interested in working with me, I offer personalized coaching where I can help you reach your goals, whether it be fat loss, building muscle, improving your health, or all the above. I provide tailored nutrition, training, and supplementation advice, one or all of those together, with 24/7 ongoing support to help you every step of the way with any questions you may have. If you're interested, you can DM me on Instagram, click the link in my profile to fill out a form, or ask any questions you may have. Also, we can hop on a free consult call where we can go over your goals, answer questions, and discuss what it would look like to work together. This episode is brought to you by LMNT Electrolytes. This month, we're switching it up with an exclusive offer that's only for VIP LMNT partners, including Carnivorecast listeners. You can now receive this free sample pack along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is provided in the show notes or my Instagram link in bio. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, all one word. And as I said, I'll include the link in the show notes. LMNT Electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious. And get yours today to help support the show. Thank you. This is a quick disclaimer before we start the show. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical advice, and please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise regime, or medications. Thank you, and on to the show. Paul Romzek is an NPC bodybuilder and coach of competitors and lifestyle clients alike. Paul helps people build muscle, lose fat, and improve their health, all while learning habits and tools they can use for life. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really excited to chat with you. I really enjoy following along with things you post about your clients and your own progress. And I think a lot of us can learn from some of the things you talk about. So I'd love to just start with your background. What got you into bodybuilding, and how'd you get started?
So I've been training myself since I was 15, 25, almost 26 now.
Wow.
I grew up playing sports. I played 5 sports in high school, and that was just something that I really enjoyed, having that competitive outlet, moving my body, just being really active. And when I was 15, I broke up with my girlfriend at the time, and then I had that moment of realization, like, I should probably start working out, build a little bit of muscle. Maybe that'll help me get girls. Turns out they don't care, but really quickly turned into more of the intrinsic motivation of getting bigger and stronger. I took to that really fast, and that was immediately extremely motivating to me. Early in my training career, I was lucky enough to be exposed to some really good coaches. My high school at the time had a really good strength and conditioning coach that introduced me to conjugate and West Side style training because he was an equipped powerlifter. So that was kind of my first foray into training, was more of a powerlifting and strength training capacity. Continued that all through high school and college. Ended up competing in powerlifting when I was in college. And then during college, I had a couple of shoulder surgeries because I tore my labrum, had the arthroscopic labrum repair. That one eventually failed. And then I had to get a little more rare surgery called a ladder J surgery. It's a more intense surgery where they reattach your bicep tendon and create like a sling in there. So I was never going to be a good bencher if I wanted to continue my powerlifting career. So I had to find something else, got into hypertrophy training. And then after college, once I had been doing that a little bit, I was kind of disillusioned with the progress that I was making with my bench press, slowly coming to terms with the fact that I'm never going to have a world-class bench. I'm never even going to have a competitive bench press. So might as well just get big, right? Before that, I never really grew up on the forums or like reading muscle mags or anything. I really didn't know anything about bodybuilding as a sport. But I still needed a competitive outlet. And that's something that I want to talk about in a little bit. And I was thinking, like, what can I do that's physical and involves lifting and training, this thing that I really love, that doesn't require me to be incredibly strong. And that happened to be bodybuilding. And it turns out you do have to be really strong to do bodybuilding, but not in the same way. And you can kind of have workarounds. Like, you don't have to do a barbell bench.
Sure.
So when I was racking my brain trying to figure out what I wanted to do that was still competitive, it was either golf or bodybuilding. Turns out I was like, golf is pretty expensive. I'll just do bodybuilding. Turns out bodybuilding is way more expensive. Uh, but I have a whole spiel about remaining competitive throughout your entire life, right? Me and tons of other people grow up playing sports. We grow up doing competitive activities. Some of us get to do that in college, some not. And then as adults, a lot of us kind of lose that competitive outlet, right? And I think that's really sad. I think competition keeps you sharp physically and mentally. It keeps you having benchmarks to constantly improve from. You're not only competing against other people, but constantly against yourself with solid benchmarks to measure yourself against. So I think that even if I hadn't chosen bodybuilding as my competitive outlet, it would have been something else because I think that's super important for a lot of people. And you know, you can choose anything as an adult to be competitive in as long as it's something, right? It can be bodybuilding, it can be playing beer league softball, it can be playing chess online. Anything that keeps you sharp mentally, I think is really important. So that was kind of how I got into bodybuilding. That was 3 years ago. I did my first show with Dom Kuza in 2022, the Western Michigan, and then everything's kind of taken off from there. I fell in love with it pretty much immediately. Just fell in love with the process of hypertrophy training in particular, and seeing the newfound growth in my body as we introduced PEDs and seeing my response to it, and really opening up a whole new world that I hadn't been exposed to before. There was all these new things to learn about and new aspects of training and physique development that I had never learned. So it was really quickly something that just consumed my entire life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know all that about you. Obviously, we're friends, but I didn't know that whole backstory. That's really interesting,
Yeah.
and it's so poignant that you brought up the competitive outlet thing because I've been thinking about, I probably have 1 to 2 years left in competitive bodybuilding because I want to be more I want to be a lot more fit, like able to hike and able to walk for long distances. And my wife and I will probably be thinking about having a kid around then. Um, and I just want to be able to like travel more and just be a little bit more balanced. And I've been kind of dreading the part of losing the competitive outlet of bodybuilding because I was a competitive lightweight rower for 8 years, and that first year after I was forced to stop because of my back injuries, I dealt with depression. Like it was
Right.
really hard.
But
Like
then people just need that
yeah,
outlet.
yeah, like rowing was my whole purpose for, you know, from eighth grade to through college. Like that was huge part of my identity, and it's similar to bodybuilding in that like the effort you put in, the results you get out. It's very linear. And so it's like that you get addicted to that sense of progress
Yeah.
and seeing the progress from your work. And not having that is really hard. So I'm thinking about like what I want to do after and how I want to keep that alive while getting healthier and being more balanced in life and not being as one dimensional.
Do you have like a short list of activities that you would want to lean into?
um, I think hiking is one. I have to be really conscious because of my past back injuries. Like I can't do like jujitsu or something like that. Although I'm sure I would love it.
Not
I've
gonna end
tried
up
it tried it twice and gotten horribly injured both times. um, and so I think it would have to be like something cardio related or hiking or like um yeah, I mean I'm still thinking about it. I've got time, which is the good
right.
thing. I do want to get more into something besides um, bodybuilding and I think the natural choice for me is video games. So trying to find something a little more productive than that.
Well, I mean, our friend Dom Kuza is getting really into the high rocks realm and endurance training realm.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would be something that you could do with your back because it does
Yeah.
involve,
I've
but
thought about it, probably in a limited capacity. Like I couldn't do any type of hinging or like free bar squatting or stuff like that with my back, but we'll see. We'll
yeah.
see. Got time. And what are your goals with bodybuilding now? Like either short term or long term or both?
Right. So in the short term, I want to take a run at nationals next year in 2025.
Cool.
I think I'm pretty well set up to do that. I At my first show, I was 25 pounds under my weight cap, uh,
Wow.
which I'm 5'10". At the time, the weight cap was 196 or 198, if
Okay.
I'm remembering correctly. I was on
Yeah.
stage about 178.
Okay.
Now the weight cap is 202 for NPC,
Yep.
in my height. So I think I can get fairly close to filling it out. I probably won't be pushing the cap, but that's the
Yeah.
short term. Long-term goal is, what everyone else wants. I want to get a pro card.
Cool.
But at the same time, I'm very realistic with myself. I've
Mm.
always been cognizant of the fact that I'm not the most genetically gifted guy or innately talented. And that's been the case with every sport that I've ever participated in. I have good insertions, I have a good work ethic, but I'm not the kind of guy that can just look at a weight and grow muscle. So my
Yeah.
path is going to be a little bit longer than like
Yeah.
a Anton kid that won his
Yeah.
pro card in December last year at 19. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's never going to be me. So I think that my path looks more like if I put in the work every single day for the next like 5 to 7 years,
Yeah.
then I'm able to get there.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. I have no problem taking the longer path because,
Yeah.
the day to day is what's really fun to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great mentality to have. And you've got time. You're young.
Yeah.
Um, at least relative to me. And I think you will, I definitely think you will get a pro card as long as you can, as long as you stay healthy and as long as you continue to want to do that.
Yeah, and that's monitoring my health is something that I absolutely have to stay on top of.
Yeah.
I don't want to, blow up my life over this, but I am willing to take some risks. I would
Yeah.
describe my risk tolerance as moderate. I'm not going to go to extremes and do really crazy exotic stuff that's
Yeah.
incredible. But I'll take some risks to get there because this is an extremely important thing in my life.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, I'm helping a very young client right now. He's 22. And I think another thing people don't always think about, I know you know this, but younger guys who get into this in their early 20s, they think the higher risk you take, the more results you'll get, or the faster you'll get there. And a lot of times, what's interesting about bodybuilding is that's just not the case.
No,
Like when you start taking androgens for the first time, your body can only make use of so much because
right.
your
I was just
androgen
explaining this to
receptors.
someone the other day. There's like when you have a lower amount of muscle, there's a threshold at which more gear only equals more side effects, not necessarily more results. And kind of
Exactly.
pushing that threshold for someone that's newer, I think finding that threshold and pushing it a little bit is good
Yeah.
because we want to. I'm not a fan of, for competitors specifically, like the minimum amount to get the job done.
Sure.
I'm not a fan of the maximum amount that you can tolerate while staying reasonably healthy because
Yeah.
everybody's got a timeline and you don't want to drag it out too long.
Yeah.
But there is a point where going further is only going to create more health risk, and we have
Yeah.
to and find where that threshold is, and it will constantly increase as you get deeper into your career, as you know. But I think that staying cognizant of that is really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's not even like more in a lot of cases it's true that more gear could mean more results, but it's much more likely to lead to side effects. In some cases it's like it will only lead to side effects, like your first cycle starting out at a gram versus 300 to 500
Yeah, that's crazy.
test, like it's literally not going to do anything for you. It's
No,
just going to make things worse.
you're going to get the same exact results plus gyno, plus acne,
Yeah.
plus everything else.
Yeah. I tried to describe it like, you need a certain surplus of calories to grow, and like doubling that isn't gonna make you grow faster.
Oh yeah, it's an identical concept. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And what got you into coaching? How did you start that? And how did that take off?
So I've always kind of fallen into leadership positions in any activity that I've ever done. Like I was captain of a lot of the sports that I played in high school. And that was something that I really enjoyed. I also enjoy, teaching people and leading people. So for a lot of my childhood, up to like the middle of high school, I actually wanted to be a history teacher until I found out what kind of money they make. And history is still a passion of mine, but it's beside the point.
Cool.
Um, and then when I was in college and I had a little more experience under my belt, I started helping some of my friends in the gym. They would come to the gym with me. I'd make programs for them, and that was something that I also really enjoyed. And then after getting into bodybuilding, I started collecting all this knowledge because I'm incapable of being into anything on a surface level. I immediately dove into everything about it. So I had all of this knowledge that I was collecting, and I was going to these local Michigan shows, and I was kind of seeing the standard of competition around here. I was like, well, I wonder what I can do to raise this standard of competition because I really do want the place that I live to be a bodybuilding hotbed, right? And combine that with my passion for leading and teaching people and the knowledge that I've collected, I figured it was a kind of a natural transition into coaching and helping people and making a tangible difference in people's lives.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so I started doing that about a year and a half ago. Started out small with a couple of friends, offering to train them for free, just to see if I could do it, right? See if it was something that I enjoyed. And I knew it would be, and I knew that they would get results, and they did. And I was able to show those off to other people that I knew a little more tangentially. And, those people were interested and they started seeing results. So I probably trained like 5 to 7 people completely for free, and they got results. And then I decided, well, okay, this is taking up some time. I might as well charge for it. Now here we are, a year and a half later, and I have a decent sized roster now. It's small but still growing. It's growing every day. So yeah, it's just something that I love, and I'm never going to stop doing. I would eventually. It's not my full-time gig right now.
Yeah.
I do still work a day job because obviously you have to support yourself. But as it takes up more and more of my time and I'm increasing my income from it, I would like to take it full time eventually. I could see that happening sometime within the next year, potentially.
Yeah.
Um, and that would be that is a big goal of mine, is to
Cool.
make a living doing this thing that I love,
Yeah.
because when I'm doing this, it doesn't feel like work, even though it is hard work and it's time consuming and it requires a lot of mental labor. It doesn't feel like work because it's something that I enjoy. I'm having fun.
Yeah. What do you like most about it?
It's really like that, making a tangible difference in people's lives and how they feel.
Mhm.
Um, when I get texts on WhatsApp like, "Oh, I can fit into my favorite pair of jeans again," or I had a guy recently who I told you about who was able to come completely off of his anxiety meds. Like those are huge things that are massive for people in their day-to-day lives, and being able to play a part in that, just every time I get one of those texts, it makes my week.
Yeah. That's
That's
amazing.
what I love doing.
Yeah, I love seeing you post them. I get some of the same happiness you're getting just from reading it. So that's really cool. And what types of people have you worked with?
So right now I work with pretty much anybody that wants to improve themselves. I have people from all the way down from people that just started lifting when they hired me to people that have been lifting for years to decades that might want to take a crack at competing. Um, yeah, my competitors are my favorite people to work with, are people that want to compete because they're really hungry. They have the skills, they have the habits in place. Um, and my job is just working with them to optimize what they're doing and push them further in their goals. So
Yeah.
those are my favorite people to work with. But outside of competitors, I really like working with people that are kind of intermediate, that have been doing this a few years. They know how to train, they know how to set up a healthy diet, and they need help getting to that advanced level.
Mhm.
So I really like working with them because I can expose them to maybe some different techniques, some different things that they weren't aware of before, and I can really help develop them into people that are more advanced, and then might end up going on to coach others themselves because they have that knowledge that I was able to set them on a path to learning.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm liking it to the difference between being like an elementary school teacher versus like a college professor.
yeah, yeah, got it.
Somebody
Um,
from the ground up versus like, you're taking people that are already have some knowledge and making them even better.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned one of the things I think you do exceptionally well is you mentioned like you don't accept like a narrow under a shallow understanding to a topic. You need to dive fully in. I think you do an excellent job of like really getting smart on topics that are important to you and your clients, and at the same time translating it to like very practical things and like trying to simplify things for people and not make things overly complicated. So I really admire that because usually people are like way too basic and don't really understand the science, or they like get so deep in the science that they're like just trying to sound smart and over explaining things to clients and making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see a lot of people, like the majority of the content that I see in online fitness is like how to lose weight, calorie deficit. Yeah, okay, I could have Googled that and seen that. It's not value to the space, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, and I don't like to talk about things that I don't have a fairly deep understanding of because I think it comes off as shallow and people can tell when you're bullshitting them.
Yep.
Um, so my approach to information is to learn something deeply and then distill it into the points that apply to people in reality. I'm really big on imparting practical knowledge to people rather than, all this theoretical knowledge. If someone wants to read theoretical knowledge that may or may not apply to them, they can go on PubMed and read an article. That's not what I'm there for. I'm there to
Mhm.
tell people how to apply things to their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and one thing we had texted about was like how to determine what sources of information to trust versus like a lot of the proxies that people use for like thinking that someone is knowledgeable or thinking that someone is someone they should listen to or get information from. How do you think people go wrong there, and like what should they be thinking about instead?
So I think that a lot of people, this is kind of down to the nature of social media algorithms, but
Yeah.
a lot of people like to make absolute statements about things.
Yeah.
The world is not absolute. It's not black and white. Everything is shades of gray. So I think the number one red flag that I would look for is somebody speaking in absolutes about a certain topic with no nuance, no qualifying statements. That's something that I would definitely look out for.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
the absolute number one thing.
I'd say another is like just because people are so biased to trust someone who's big and has a lot of muscle by default, like almost using that as a negative proxy for who to listen to. Like you should be more skeptical when you see someone who's like jacked out of their mind, crazy bodybuilder and is like making claims almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I put this on my story yesterday, but I do think a lot of people do get by on their genetics and they and
Yeah,
they get big in spite of what they do and not because
absolutely.
of what they do.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think that kind of leads to, for them, a narrow understanding of what does and doesn't work, versus someone else that had to scratch and claw for every bit of muscle that they have and ended up getting big. That person probably knows a little bit more about hypertrophy training than the person
yeah,
that started throwing, got 20-inch arms in 6 months.
yeah, absolutely. And the genetically gifted huge person has probably found out they don't need to like do much education or research to
Right.
be able to get an audience. So they're less likely to like go and do that work.
And then they kind of apply the same thing that worked for them to
Yeah.
anyone who might be coaching.
Yep.
And that's really not the way to go. Like there's a variance in what works for different people. And it's not extremely wide until you get to a more advanced level, but there are different approaches and different things that work for different people's lifestyles primarily,
Yep.
not on a physiological level. But I think that a lot of people that were just naturally gifted only know one way of doing things.
Yep. And speaking of information and sources to trust, tell me how you met Dom Kuza and how that relationship has evolved.
So I got really lucky when I met Dom. When I was first thinking about getting into bodybuilding when I was about 22, I was out at a bar, I think it was like the night before Thanksgiving, and I ran into a guy that I knew from high school. And at the time, it was right after all the lockdowns and everything. And I had been out of the gym because they were all closed for a little bit. And I was becoming kind of disillusioned with working out at home and not really feeling like I was getting anywhere, just kind of a general feeling of malaise with my own training. And this guy that I ran into was also really into fitness. And I don't know why I just unloaded all of that feeling onto him. And I told him, I was like, I just need something different. I'm thinking about doing bodybuilding. He was like, I know the guy. He showed me Dom's Instagram, and at the time, Dom was really well known locally in Michigan, but not nearly the profile he is now. And I saw Dom, and I was like, okay, I'll give him a follow. And over the next few days and weeks, I was looking through his profile and I was seeing the information he was putting out. I was like, okay, this is the guy. I could just tell that, his personality and the way he thought was something that I would really resonate with. So I reached out to him, and now we're here. We did first bulk, started PEDs, did our first show, and now I'm doing mentoring with him. I did one-on-one mentoring with him for a while. I've done a couple of his group classes. Now I would consider him a friend as well as a coach and mentor. So I
Awesome.
was absolutely very fortunate to have great guidance between him and the strength and conditioning coach that I had in high school, and all the people that I've been able to surround myself with across the years. I've just had really good experiences with all of them, especially him.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's one thing you've learned from Dom that's more like a macro lesson, and one more technical area that he's helped you learn about?
So the macro thing that I've learned from him that has served me the most in both coaching and personal relationships actually was never blow anybody off. And when that applies to business, everybody's a potential client. Treat every conversation as if that person could hire you. When someone DMs me a question on Instagram, no matter how granular it is or like how much time I may or may not have at the time, I'll still take the time to answer it when I can, because that makes people feel good when you engage with them and you are able to answer their question. And if I can't answer it, I'll refer them to somebody that can. Um, but that served me really well in my coaching. I've had a lot of those people turn into clients. I've had a lot of those clients turn into very successful clients. I tend to spend a lot of time on Discord and Reddit, just on the fitness subs, talking to people. And, even if some of those people will never become clients, it's just fun to help people, even if they aren't paying me, as long as it's, not taking a ton of my time, which it rarely ever does. And then on the personal side of things, I have friends that just reached out to me through Instagram that I easily could have blown off their DM. But I accepted it, got to chatting, and now they're some of my best friends.
That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And what's maybe one more technical thing that he's taught you a lot about? Give me
So
any.
yeah, on a more micro level, I think DIM is a really good supplement
Hmm,
for men and women. That's been one of my favorite supplements that I've been leaning into a lot. It can act as both an AI and a SERM. Um,
interesting.
if you In men, it's really good if they're enhanced and they tend to get gyno. Or it's really good for troubleshooting estrogen. So if someone's getting high estrogen sides at like a normal serum level, that could be because they're not metabolizing estrogen correctly. And it kind of promotes estrogen metabolism down more favorable pathways. So
Yep.
it's for men. And then in women that are experiencing estrogen dominance, it does the same thing, and it can help with those side effects. And it's pretty cheap. It's extremely low risk. So I think it has a lot of use cases, and that's something that I would not have. I would have found it eventually, but I would not have started
Yeah.
using it widely and as soon as I did without him.
Yeah. Yeah. I only recently learned about it from a coach, and
It's not
I,
very common, but I think
yeah,
it's extremely useful for how uncommon it
yeah,
is.
definitely. And I'm probably the only person in the world or one of the few people who absolutely doesn't need it, at least right now,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's still
right.
interesting.
Not
Uh,
everybody can run a gram and have an estrogen of like 6.
yeah. I have trouble keeping my estrogen up.
Yeah.
But another thing we talked about was how like especially with lifestyle clients, I see this all the time. Like less so with clients, but more so with people who ask me for advice on like, how do I get in shape? How do I get started in the gym? And maybe they're overweight, or maybe they're already trying to do everything at once. Like they're a little overweight, but they've already been like, okay, I'm going to the gym 7 days a week. I'm tracking my macros. I'm thinking about like, measuring my ketone levels and intermittent fasting and, cold and hot therapy and all these things. And I'm like, you're going to crash and burn. Like, what's the smallest change you can make and not notice it? So how do you think about like building a foundation of habits for your lifestyle clients?
Yeah, and like you were saying, when you're trying to make all those small optimizations, if you don't have the foundation of proper healthy habits, it's
Yeah.
not, you're going to get overwhelmed. So when somebody comes to me and they're a completely blank slate, I start really basic and I start with extremely fundamental things like, okay, let's eat the same number of meals each day. Let's shop on the perimeter of the grocery store. Really small guidelines to make incremental changes that are adherable long term. And once they can just eat a certain number of meals each day, like we literally just start with eat 4 meals a day. And then we'll go with, okay, let's have a protein, a carb, and a fat in each meal, or a protein, carb, and a fruit or veggie. I mean, and then as they get more comfortable with those habits, as they become, just fundamental things that are on autopilot that they don't have to think about, then we can introduce more granular things like, okay, maybe let's start tracking protein. Maybe let's start logging your carbs. Maybe let's implement a whey supplement or something like that, small supplemental changes. But at each one of those thresholds, we're going to see progress, most likely. And then we'll ride out that change until it's automatic and until we stop seeing results just from doing that. And then we'll move to the next level. And I think that makes it a lot more comfortable than overhauling somebody's entire lifestyle. Because if you throw an entire Google Doc full of information at somebody, they're not going to know where to start. They
Mm,
have no concept of how to schedule their day around these things. And they think, oh, this is going to take too much time. When in reality, it's just small steps to improve the things that they're already doing.
yep. Yeah. I think that's brilliant. And that type of framework can work for competitors too in a lot of ways. Just thinking about like what are the steps to building a successful off season. Or I was recently talking to Kurt Havens about um helping guys who feel like they're stuck with the amount of food they can eat. And he was immediately like talking about some of the things he's doing with Roman Fritz around like using fructose to circumvent leptin and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but like let's talk about the average guy in the gym who comes up to you who's like, I can't gain weight. Like, where do you start with them? It's like, are you eating this many meals a day? Are you like, tracking your calories? Are you,
And a lot of the times with those kinds of people, it's what are you eating? Because if
yeah,
you ask them, it's going to be just garbage.
yeah,
It's like garbage, like box mac and cheese.
yeah,
Okay, let's replace that with rice. Let's
yeah,
start get away from the middle of the grocery store, shop on the perimeter, stuff that's
yeah,
going to digest easier. Because when you fix somebody's digestion, when they're eating foods that digest easily, they're going to be able to eat more because they're not
yeah.
constantly stuffed all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's like with digestion, like start by finding foods you tolerate. Like don't eat in a stressed state. Like you don't need to jump to, you know, probiotics and digestive enzymes and all these things right away. Like start from the ground up.
Right. And I think there's really common advice that I see for those people that are, just eat more fat. And that is really poor advice to me. For the average guy, the average super skinny guy that thinks he has a fast metabolism that he can't
Yeah.
eat, I think that's
Yeah.
bad advice because that's going to slow down your digestion. And
Yeah.
you're probably not eating all unprocessed foods that digest easily to begin with. So
Mm.
all that's going to do is make you feel more full and more shitty
Yep.
until you're stuck in this cycle of, oh, I still can't gain weight. And I'm, drinking a gallon of olive oil a day. Why am I having diarrhea? Uh,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? Like I don't think that fat first approach for regular people is good. I
Yeah.
know one of the Dom in particular and some of the other Camp Jansen guys like it for really big guys that are pushing like 300 pounds. yeah, there's some application there. But a guy that's 140 pounds soaking wet that can't gain weight, probably not, I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing people jump into the minutia on, or just like have this idea in their head from social media, and like I'd call it virtue signaling, is like you have to eat organic everything. You have to completely avoid factory farming. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see that a lot, and I think it's a lot of fitness people sniffing their own farts. Um, I think it really just raises the barrier to entry for average people.
Yep.
It makes fitness seem a lot more complicated than it has to be.
Yep.
I think whether or not you're eating, organic, free range, everything, if you're eating whole foods and you're eating enough protein and you're, generally staying to things that you can cook yourself or that you have to cook yourself, then you're like 90% of the way there. And
Yep.
if everybody was eating, the most organic and most natural foods ever, would we be healthier as a population? Yeah, probably. I don't know. But I just don't think that telling the average person that eats out 5 times a week and is eating, lean cuisines for lunch because they think that's what they have to do to lose weight, telling them that they have to get chicken breast that's $10 a pound because it's
Yep.
organic that's just you're just not living in reality if that's your recommendation for somebody that is starting from zero.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
But
funny.
well, that
Go
also
ahead.
points to a wider issue that I see with
Mm,
people in the fitness industry is that a lot of them just are so far divorced from the reality of what their clients and everyday people are living in
yep.
that some of the recommendations that they make just don't really make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I can relate so much to what you're talking about going back to my carnivore days. I don't eat a carnivore diet anymore, and I see it as like a strong elimination diet now. But there are a lot of very obese people who have lost a lot of weight with it. And I think part of the reason is it's so simple. And people would always try to overcomplicate it. They'd be like, oh, do I have to eat grass-fed meat? Do I have to, make sure I'm getting these organ meats every week? Do I have to, uh, you know, implement this meal timing, or what fat to protein ratio should I be on? And it's like, you're 400 pounds. If you just eat meat and drink water, and like you're going to lose weight and you're going to feel amazing. Like,
They're gonna accidentally put themselves in a deficit. It's kind of the
yeah,
same with intermittent fasting.
yeah,
People just accidentally put themselves in a deficit, and
yeah,
that's
yeah. But they're all trying to overcomplicate it. And then there's, talking about people who are like divorced from the reality of their audience. You have like Paul Saladino being like, I eat everything raw. I eat half an ounce of liver with this meal, half an ounce of kidney this meal, half an ounce. Like, it's
yeah,
just
that's crazy. No
no.
normal person's gonna
Yeah,
do.
no one's gonna do that. Like, he literally, wherever he travels, he has to like freeze and bring a cooler of all his meats, which like people aren't gonna do, you know. Uh,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I think a lot of times people can miss the forest for the trees, and
Definitely.
uh, not understand the average person's situation. What's something you've changed your mind about in the last 6 to 12 months? It can be in coaching or bodybuilding or whatever.
So a few things come to mind. Like I'm newer to this, so I'm still constantly learning. Um, but a couple of things that come to mind are carb cycling when you're in a surplus. I used to think that it was unnecessary, just eat the food and you'll gain weight. But I think for people that have a little bit more muscle that have to eat a little bit more, I think it can actually be really valuable to stay leaner when you bulk.
Hmm.
I've seen it in my own clients since I've started implementing it a little bit more. Guys stay leaner when they do it,
Yeah.
and it leads to really good results.
Hmm.
Uh, I also think it's really useful for guys that have to eat a lot but are kind of low appetite
Hmm.
because the appetite is higher on those training days. So we can add an intro. We can have a carb dense post workout meal and really drive up carb intake on those training days, and then pull it back. Maybe even take out an entire meal on their rest days, and
Yeah.
they feel better and they have less appetite issues. So that's something that I've been doing recently, and it's worked out really well. Another thing is I've started to progress volume for people a little bit when they're in a bulk. I used to be against that just across the board. But now I've found that if I make some really targeted adjustments to volume across a training block when they're in a surplus, that leads to pretty good results. And it's not like the RP style, like 50 to 100% volume increases
Yeah.
across the block. I'm talking like adding a couple sets here and there. So at the end of a training block, we might be ending up with like max 30% more volume than we started,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
50%. And the way I typically do that is I'll actually add movements into the program
Hmm.
instead of adding sets to existing movements, because I think that that kind of helps with the mental component of, it gets kind of stale when you're doing 3 or 4 sets of the same movement.
Yeah.
Uh, you're not as mentally engaged with that movement anymore, and
Yeah.
you become mentally disengaged from the training as a whole when your volume's too high. So I'll add a different movement in. So like if someone wants to bring up their back, right? They have a couple sets of a pull down already. I'll give them maybe a different pull down or a unilateral pull down if they're only doing bilateral, or vice versa. And that allows for some really quick progression on that movement, which is really
Yeah.
motivating. And that variation across the session, even though we're doing more total work, will really help keep them engaged. That's what I've
Yeah.
found.
Yeah. I really like that. I used kind of the RP type method for like 2 years worth of training. And one thing I found exactly what you're talking about, like when you get to like the fourth set of a movement, you're just like, I'm done with this.
Right.
And it really
And it
diminishes.
really extends the total time of the session.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when people are following that RP style, like at the end of a training block, their workouts are taking like 2.5 hours.
Yeah. And at the beginning of the training block, they're like 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So it just like
Yeah.
screws up your whole day. It's like really
No.
weird. Yeah, I didn't like that either. And the I really like the idea of adding a separate movement, because another thing that would get really demotivating is like, let's say you have like a pec fly and then a press, and you're adding sets of the pec fly, and so your press is actually like either stalling or getting weaker,
Right.
even though it's supposed to be progressing. And that was always like, just I'm like, I'm supposed to do this extra set or 2 sets on this pec fly, but I know it's just going to make me weaker for the next movement. Like,
Yeah.
it's really frustrating.
So like in that situation, what I would do is if you're pre-exhausting pecs, I would keep that pre-exhaust movement the same, and
Yeah.
then add maybe another fly variation after your press. So
Yeah.
that second fly variation is still going to increase because it's a new
Yeah.
movement. You're going to be able to progress easily, and it's not going to affect your press.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I found really frustrating at the end of a training block, is you just feel like you were like fighting to hold on.
Right.
Uh,
And then you have to take your scheduled deload because you got beat up so bad by the two
yeah.
guys on the best.
Yep. Yep. No fun. Done with that. Cool. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I've learned a lot in this conversation and from you, and I'm sure the audience will too. Where can folks connect with you if they want to hook up for coaching or reach out to you? And I can have a link in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so I'm primarily on Instagram for my coaching business. Follow me, Paul Romzek _TAF.
Okay.
And shoot me a DM if anybody's interested, and or just shoot me a DM to say hi.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have that. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.